Hello, my name is Lizzy Palmer and this is another episode for Lunar Poetry Shorts. Today I am in Camberwell in my new house, which I just moved into yesterday, and I am joined by the poet Abi Palmer.
Hello, Lizzy.
Hello, Abi. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. It feels like we're cousins or sisters.
Yeah, long lost cousins.
Yeah.
I think we are.
Yeah,
I feel
definitely.
it.
Yeah.
Cool. So, as we always do, I think we'll start with a poem, please.
Well, have I got a treat for you? I have a poem called The Palmer. So I don't know if you know this, Lizzy Palmer, but the origins of our name is in of our shared family name is in pilgrimages, so
Yes.
Palmers who went out, and something that is interesting about that is a lot of the pilgrims who went out on pilgrimages and came back with palm leaves to prove that they'd been on pilgrimages actually didn't finish the pilgrimage and would buy them on the way. So this is a poem about that. It's called The Palmer. The Palmer. He wore the hair shirt till his skin rusted, shaved his scalp, ate no meat on the Sabbath, lowered his gaze as the woman passed, slapped his horse and cantered eastwards. Sun failed. He sank into trench black, awoke in a field he could not remember, lost one sandal, shuffled forwards, missed the boat, wept, waited. And on the shore his drunken hips lurched, unfamiliar. He licked his teeth and counted the days. His tongue was sand, heard tales of slaughter against your name, offered another coin to the pardoner, who handed him a branch. He plucked one leaf, split his fingers, felt your laugh in the empty wind, cracked the spine and mumbled a paternoster, wove himself across, held it upwards in blistered hands, cried hallelujah and cantered home.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abi.
You're very welcome.
So the first question, which we ask everybody,
Mm-hmm.
is why poetry?
That's a really interesting question. Do people have succinct answers to that question?
No. I think pretty much everyone's answer has been different
Yeah.
to that question, which
Yeah.
is, I think, it seems like quite a, I don't know, almost a kind of silly, vague question, but it does provide really interesting answers.
Yeah, I guess for me, poetry is a lot about organisation of thoughts. Like I have a lot of words to say quite a lot of the time. If you're ever with me in a pub, you might notice that. Poetry is so much about the organisation of ideas. You have like this very small frame within which to place things. So I respond to poetry in a way that I don't respond to other writing. It makes me think in a different way, and it's just how things come out. Like I've tried writing in other forms. Apparently I sleep talk and rhyme, which is a really bizarre thing that my boyfriend told me recently.
Oh, I snore in iambic pentameter.
Yeah,
it's
well,
just natural.
yeah, well, us bards. So I guess it's a lot about organisation of thoughts and it's also, I guess, about restrictions. Like you've got so much space out there within which to put things. I'm a words sort of person, and then having limits. I like limits in writing. I really like the Ulipan poets who set themselves like really rigid rules, and I like that that kind of organisation of ideas. I think things happen which surprise you. That if I had the freedom of a novel, it would probably be quite. I would have too many ideas and just pile one on top of the other. And the other thing, I have a lot of pain in my hands. I've got I've got a medical condition that causes a lot of pain, and so actually writing very small amounts is helpful. I couldn't write a novel, so I guess that's kind of, I've always written poetry since I was really young. I think I wrote my first poem when I was about 4, but it's kind of lucky because as I've got older, it's become more and more necessary.
Yeah. So, I mean, often the way I sort of, when I'm thinking about how and why I write poetry, I kind of think of it, I wonder if it's almost like a control thing or an OCD thing, particularly if I write something that's quite strictly structured and rhythmic. So do you think maybe that's got something to do with it, or is it more of a cathartic thing for you? As you say, you have a lot of pain and concentrating on sort of ordering and metering something.
Yeah, it's kind of both, actually. I would say in some ways that I think I write for 2 reasons. One, because I've got something that I just need to talk about. So for instance, I've written a lot about disability and pain. And sometimes it's just easier to process it that way. But actually, when I write like that, it tends to be more. I remove restrictions, so I remove punctuation altogether, and I remove any rules except that just to keep going, which is kind of the opposite to all the advice you're given to deal with pain. But when I'm writing about other things, it tends to be having the rules, or having a restriction. I'm quite a perfectionist writer. I'll just rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and cut and stick and then go into it with a pen and go over and over the same line kind of obsessively. So yeah, I guess that obsessive. That obsession to make it right and make it perfect. Then sometimes something comes out of that you weren't expecting. So I feel so there are 2 ways of thinking, I suppose, or 2 ways of using words. One is that you've got an idea that you need to say, and the idea is fully formed and the words are just using it. And sometimes I'm using the words because I like how they sound, and then through that suddenly you have some kind of major revelation, or it makes you think about things differently. So then sometimes I'm led by the words, and sometimes the words are leading me.
So what have been your main influences as a writer?
Well, I've had some really good help, I suppose. When I started writing, as I said, when I was a lot younger, but when I moved to London, I met some really influential poets. I ended up living quite close to Wayne Holloway-Smith, and hearing, reading his book, Beloved, in case you've been wondering, and that was a kind of real shift for me in terms of how I wrote. The aesthetics of the language he uses, it was, he would create a mood through the poem, kind of that would totally shift how you were feeling, I suppose. I think he'd probably be quite bewildered by that description, but yeah, creating a mood that is totally new rather than just writing about something that's happening to you. That was a huge influence, and then I guess since then, Bobby Parker's been a big influence in totally the opposite way, in that he talks very much about what's going on in one very distinct voice, and so that's been a huge influence. In terms of women writers, I suppose I was really influenced. I heard Karen Haley read a few years ago, and she has a really she has a way of just creating. She's a voice actor as well, so she creates these voices in her poems, and then through that you again, it creates a different mood through performing a voice is a really interesting thing, and Salena Godden manages to do kind of a mixture of both, where she writes in a voice, so on the page, and as she's performing it sounds totally it totally is, you're there with them just through the voice that's used. Oh, okay, so yeah, I guess in terms of character poems, this is kind of a really good example of a poem that I started writing it with a character in mind, and then it ended up telling me more about myself than I realised. The character in it is a clown. I grew up in a kind of clowning community. My mum was a clown artist, so we would kind of go to a lot of clown conventions, and there would always be clowns around us. My brother ended up doing clowning, and this poem, I started writing it as a with this clown character in mind, and then it ended up being quite an emotional poem about how I feel about I guess my family a little bit. This is called Clown Noir, a love poem in 3 acts. Act 1, the hotel lobby. Cartoon tears roll into your tequila. Plop, the barman, why the long face? A pause, no punchline, just a slump fall, crown knocked sideways on a badly shaven egg. I scooch over a couple of seats. Franca, the bar stool says. You raise a painted brow. Act 2, hotel room number 1304. You're undressing me. Pantaloons flung carelessly over the open door, and you're blowing raspberries onto my upturned pelvis. Grease paint smeared all over my inner thigh. I squeal in delight. A pantomime pause as you fumble for contraception, searching case within case within case. I lean over and open the minibar. A can of peanuts explodes. Act 3, the morning after. Side by side on a satin headboard, my hair unpinned and matted with custard foam. You tap my arm, intimate the loss of one bulbous red nose. I fold my legs and hiccup it into your gloved hand. Presto, a glimmer of smile. I stand to shower, trailing a fallen curtain around my breasts. Your eyes accept, all happiness fades. But I'm back on my knees and whispering, let me mother you. I will sit backstage and powder dusty creases into your rumpled face. Night after night I will play your accordion, pipes, comedy sound effects over your loop of grief, balance my delicate ballet flat over your oversized pancake feet and dance. One day you'll even speak to me. One day we'll look back on this moment and laugh.
Thank you. So a lot of your poetry is you perform a lot, and presumably a lot of it has been written for performing. And so I was going to ask you about what projects and things you have going on at the moment. But I was reading a little bit about some of your recent work, and you do a lot of pieces which are interactive. Mm-hmm. With the audience. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe it would be interesting to talk more specifically about some of those. And I should say, for listeners, if you would like to be involved in a bit of audience participation with the next poem, you should now go to your kitchen and get some salt and keep it aside, and you'll find out why. Surely. So yeah, perhaps Abi, you could tell us a bit about your interactive pieces that you do.
Yeah, so I something that really interests me about writing is the idea of metaphors, and new the kind of conflict that happens when you have a metaphor that makes you think about something from a different angle, so a space that you hadn't connecting to things that hadn't been connected before. I'm really interested in kind of connections and juxtapositions. So I started I wondered how far that could go and whether it could go beyond just words into other language. So I started trying to write poems that you were totally immersed in. So for instance, the salt one we did later was an attempt at immersing you within an idea that became the poem. And then from there I started becoming more interested in the opposite of that. So what happens when you take one experience and words and contrast it with a totally different physical experience? How does that change how you listen to the words? And that developed into a project called Alchemy, which is about testing these experiences. It's kind of taking classic the classic idea of alchemy is basically earth, air, water and fire being the basis upon which everything is created. Aristotle kind of was suggesting that the entire universe is just made from these four elements. And then in the in the 17th century, as science as we know it now, empirical science, started to develop, people started to question that logic, in that it's entirely text based. You know, Aristotle said it and it was quoted back for generations. Robert Boyle came along and said, well, actually we shouldn't just be relying on the words of one writer. We should be testing these experiences physically, and so he started testing reactions between different elements, and through that he formed the basis of the periodic table. So that's a kind of a really exciting conflict between a verbal or a literary experience and actual physical experience. And I was wondering if we could reproduce that. So alchemy is basically a chance to do that. I've created it. I did it as a live performance first, for an event called Lunar, which was themed around alchemy, and I was testing people's experiences. That I had four poems, one based upon earth, one air, one water and one fire, and then four physical experiences. You could have like dirt rubbed into your hands for earth, or you could smell the smell of a lit match that's just been blown out for fire, and I was, or you could suck on a Wrigley's airwaves. That was one of them. So that was quite an intense experience. So there are all these different experiences, and you pick two at random. So you might have an earth poem mixed with an air aroma or an air experience, and I was interested to see, would that change your physical reaction change the way you heard the words. And I've just been kind of gathering people's responses to that, and some of them are quite surprising. I recently created the Alchemy project into a box set that people could take home and try at home, and people keep getting back to me and telling me, oh well, when I heard this poem using one physical stimulus, it felt like a breakup poem, but then with another one it was a love poem. And that's amazing to me to go, okay, that's totally transformed how you heard and felt those words, and so pushing outwards beyond language was kind of a really interesting experience.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It would be interesting to see how far you could go with that, and in how many different ways as well. That's a really brilliant idea.
Thank you. I'm hoping to push it further at different times, but getting alchemy out at the moment is my current project.
Yeah. So do you think maybe you'll, like, in terms of future projects, are you quite interested in doing similar things like that? Do you think it will be more kind of interactive, performancey stuff, or do you still have sort of other things on the go, like just for yourself or other types of writing, or?
Yeah, there's definitely two. I'm kind of on this. I feel like this entire interview has been like two strands of talking. One where I'm talking about writing, and one where I'm talking about performing, and they definitely are kind of pushing in different directions at the same time. So I feel like recently I'm trying to improve just the act of writing. That's something, and you could become gimmicky if you only ever do fun interactive or weird interactive stuff. So I feel like I'm kind of pushing in two directions. One which is very performance based, and not just performance but experience based, challenging like playing with language and other experiences, and I'm kind of really curious to see where that will go next. All of the I before I did Alchemy, I did a project based around mineralogy, which had a similar theme. This is something that you probably can't tell via a podcast, but Alchemy and mineralogy are both projects which involve matchboxes. I collect novelty matchboxes, and the whole thing started by what could you put in a matchbox that somebody opened, and then the poem came from that. So I've got like 500 matchboxes left that I've got to fill, so I've got to do something more with those. And after Alchemy there probably will be a development. I've been kind of referring to it as micro-immersive poetry, and I'm curious to see different ways in which you could get absorbed in or pulled out from the moment through what's in the box. Sounds like a magician. But on the other hand, I'm also trying to develop the actual practice of writing, and I don't want to go too far just down experimentation without also focusing on actually making the words good too. So that's something I'm trying to develop as well, and that's hard sometimes.
Yeah. So on that note, maybe we could have our third and final poem.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna try an experiment. If any of you at home want to try this and feedback on how it changes your listening experience, I would be really grateful. This is a poem from my mineralogy collection. my collection of poems about minerals. The mineral here is salt. So what you would do if you were to join in, and feel free not to, but it would be great to if you did. What you would do is put a tiny little bit of salt on the end of your tongue. You can close your mouth, but don't swallow until I say the word swallow. And I will emphasise the word swallow. Are you all ready and sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. SALT. Storms are looking tangible. Sun's axis leans, tipping. Sunbeams are leaping to shade. Alas, love, the skies are loosening. That scarred and languid Titan spits atom like thunderclaps. Seal all locks, there's something at large. Then, slowly, and like teardrops spilling, all liquid trickles silently arising. Let the streams ascend, lurching they swell as land turns sea, like all little tiny sailors afloat link arms together, shouting ahoy loudly. They're shelterless, angular, lonely. There's salt water against lemony, turgid skin. Then speak about luck, that sunken Atlantis lurks, treasure spotted as legend tells. Sandy anchors lower to sparkling ancient lungless terrain. Sea folk are looming there, sharing ancient loot. Tongue, swallow all lowly terror. Sit afloat, love the storm and look. Treasure.
Brilliant, thank you. It'd be interesting to hear some feedback if anyone took part in that.
Yeah, I'm also curious. Normally there's someone with salt on their tongues as I do that, so I speed up if it looks like they're going whack. So the best is like salt flakes if you've got any of those. That sounds really pretentious.
Great. My final question. Where can people find out more about your work? Do you have websites, blogs, Twitter, etc.?
I do indeed. I've got a website that automatically redirects to a blog. It's www.abipalmer.com. So that's ABI Palmer. Yep, and you can also get me on Twitter. I'm Abi Palmer _bot because I'm a robot. And you can find me on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/Abi Palmer is your friend. I think that might be what it is. Yeah, so that's how you can find me.
Great. Thanks, Abi Palmer.
You are very welcome, Lizzy Palmer.
If anybody would like to leave their feedback, you can do so in the comments underneath the YouTube video, which you are looking at and listening to. Alternatively, on the Lunar podcast Twitter feed, which is silent_tongue. And yeah, we'll see what happens. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.